Victims of domestic abuse will be put at risk by the early release of prisoners to ease prison overcrowding. That's according to the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, Nicole Jacobs. She spoke out, understandably, I think we can say, after we discovered that Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, was going to see the release of hundreds of burglars, shoplifters and violent criminals up to 60 days, so 2 months early, to tackle the crisis in our jails. What is the crisis? Well, there are fewer than 240 spaces left in men's jails in England and Wales. Just 238 spaces left out of operational capacity of 85,000. Our prisons are 99.7% full. Women's prisons also 99.9% full, with just 118 spaces left. This has meant, therefore, the biggest early release scheme from prisons in nearly 20 years. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Vanessa Frake. She's a former prison governor and author of The Governor, My Life Inside Britain's Most Notorious Prisons. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Julia. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. Well, you've been a prison governor at women's prisons and also a very famous men's prison, Wormwood Scrubs as well. First of all, I mean, in terms of the risk to the public generally, we'll talk about domestic abuse violence victims as well, but in terms of the risk to the public early, these people were going to be released in a couple of months anyway. Is there an extra risk to the public of these people being allowed out 60 days early, other than the fact that they've got 60 more days to reoffend?
I don't actually think so. You know, when prisoners come to the end of their sentence, many of them are on temporary release anyways and go out daily. Some have jobs and work outside prisons. So I don't think that the 60-day mark is anything to be completely concerned about. I think more worrying is the state of our prisons. And if we have, something like the Strangeways riot, where they practically burnt down the prison, we've got nowhere to put the prisoners. I think that's a more concerning thing for members of the public. So,
yeah, I mean, again, a lot of people just don't realise a lot of people who are technically still behind bars don't spend a lot of that time behind bars, as you say, out on those sort of schemes. I was quite surprised to see, in terms of the people who'd be released, we were told early on, oh, no, it wouldn't be people who've been convicted of serious violent crimes. Anyone who's been sentenced to more than 4 years or where the minimum sentence would be 4 years wouldn't be out. But let's face it, I mean, there are numerous violent crimes that people don't get those sorts of sentences. And goodness me, I've covered as a news reporter over the years many an occasion when a man has been convicted of the most heinous crimes against their partner, their girlfriend, their wife or their ex, not been sentenced to 4 years behind bars. So those people would be on early release. What did you make of what this domestic violence czar effectively had to say about the risk to those women, that they thought they had another 60 days of sanctuary and safety from their partner, their ex-partner, but they're going to be back out on the streets?
Yeah, I totally understand that. Anyone who's ever been a victim of domestic violence is always looking over their shoulder, and my heart goes out to them. I do believe that these prisoners on this release scheme will be closely monitored, so we're led to believe. And also, Alex Chalk did say that it would be low-level crime. I don't think that domestic violence, serious domestic violence, although all domestic violence is serious, falls into that category. So I would be hopeful that it will be the likes of shoplifters and traffic offences, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but again, this problem is not getting any better and is not going to get any better in terms of overcrowding. And let's talk about your experience behind bars, because I think most of us who think that, if you commit serious crimes or if it's shoplifting, low-level offence, doesn't feel low-level for the 40th time it happens to a shopkeeper trying to make a living. Repeat offenders at low level, I'm sorry, most of us think those people should be going behind bars. Big issue is what happens to people when they're behind bars, and the overcrowding issue in our prisons has meant that people are not getting any rehabilitation. They're not getting trained up. They're not getting skills. They're not getting, taught how to read and write. A huge number of people are going to prison unable to have those basic skills. Of course, they can't get a job because they're unable to do these basic skills. And also, rehabilitating people, for instance, who are on drugs. Pretty much none of that is happening on the scale it needs to happen at in prisons now, is it? Because of that overcrowding. Talk us through what that means for daily life in prison, not just for the prisoners, but the prison officers as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to manage a prison that is running at a overcrowding rate of say 50–60%. You know, prisoners get very frustrated and at close quarters. So you have a cell that's been designed for one person suddenly has three people in it. You know, you can imagine there's an issue of decency and privacy and that sort of thing. You know, many people may say, well, you know, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. But I think we have to think about these things because in in sort of the day-to-day management of it can be a tinderbox. You know, with staff shortages, high turnovers of staff, inexperienced staff, prisoners become very volatile, very violent. You know, we've seen the violence in prison rates rise year on year, violence against prisoner on prisoner and prisoner on staff. So this is all things that unfortunately happen when you get overcrowding. In this country, we're very keen on locking people up. You know, it's a vote winner. We want to be the party of law and order, regardless of what political party you are. And I think that we need to look more at focusing on reducing reoffending. Every prisoner place in this country costs around £47,000–48,000 per prisoner per year. You know, I know where I'd much prefer my taxes to go to would be helping reduce that reoffending.
And the way
We
to
we
do
lock up the
that is often, you know, and again, I look, I'm very, very clear cut. You do commit the crime, you should be prepared to do the time. But I also know that a lot of people who come into the prison system, they've been in care, they've been failed by their parents, failed by their schools. They've, you know, very easy not to get involved with drug gangs if you don't live on the sort of estate that is run by the drug gangs. It's a lot easier for an awful lot of us to make the right choices, and it's a lot harder for a lot of other people to make the right choice. It doesn't mean they don't have to make the right choices, but offering that help, offering that rehabilitation, trying to get people off drugs, educating them, giving them a skill so they can actually get a job later on, you know, talking therapy, things like that. Some of the Western countries are doing a lot of that, and they are seeing really low rates of reoffending. We are doing less and less of it, and our reoffending rates are pretty much sky high. I mean, by the time you go to prison, basically, you're already you know, a lifetime offender, aren't you, for most criminals? So we're just creating a problem that we just take people in, we make them worse, we put them back out again. But I mean, how many more prison places would we need to build? How many more prisons would we need to build to actually deal with this issue? Because crime's not going away anywhere. We're sending people to prison for longer, which I think is a good thing, personally, for some of those crimes. But we haven't got any spaces left. It's untenable. Like, what are we going to do? What, in a few months' time, we're going to have no prison spaces left? We're just going to let a load of other people out?
Yeah, and you know, in 2007, Jack Straw did exactly the same thing, and that lasted for 3 years on the early release scheme. So this is nothing new, and this is what this country does: is we focus on locking people up. We don't focus on rehabilitation, and that is part of what prison is about. Yes, it's the removal of liberty. Yes, it's retribution. Yes, it's punishment, but it's also supposed to be about reducing reoffending and getting prisoners to address their offending so that when they go out, they become a purposeful member of society. And unfortunately, we don't do that at the moment. It's not a vote winner for a member of parliament to stand up and say, I am going to put money into and invest in reducing reoffending in this country.
Yeah, it's absolute madness. It really, really is. Great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Hope you come on the show again. Vanessa Frake, she's a former prison governor. She knows what she's talking about. She's the author of The Governor, My Life Inside Britain's Most Notorious Prisons. Still with me is Conservative commentator Benedict Spence. I mean, lovely lady, but I wouldn't mess with her, would you? Can't imagine the prisoners would mess with her. Here's the thing. You don't have to be sort of airy-fairy, you know, liberal, you know, tofu-munching idiot to think that cutting reoffending rates would be a good idea. I'm a big fan of people going to prison if they've done a crime that they need to go to prison for. But what we do with them behind bars is what matters. We have massive overcrowding, but the government has not put the money in to build more prisons at the same time as sentencing people 2 longer spells in prison. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's a lot of it, isn't it? It's also about circumstances you come from, in which case you have to say, well, then it needs to be earlier, it needs to be education. Not actually in the prisons. Actually, you need to be getting in there much earlier if that's what you want to do.
Well, don't let parents fail their kids. Dads need to be in the homes. Don't let kids trip from school.
But the other thing, if you live in a society that has mass migration and the population expands at the rate that ours is, necessarily you're going to need more prison spaces, because you will have people who come as part of that. You will have more people in the population. That will cause more crime.
Huge amount of people who are in our prison system are actually people who come from
And if you don't want to deport them, as our government doesn't seem to really want to deport anybody, then you're going to have to find somewhere for them. That means building more prison spaces.
Yeah, you can put my taxes up to build more prison spaces anytime you want. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, who would be a prison officer now in terms of what they're dealing with? There's the violence from people on skunk and things like that.